I see that you have ventured out of my nice warm pavilion to come find me, little one. How are you, P? Come, sit by my fire. It has been many days since we have talked.
Where have you been? The channel's been rather quiet lately. I brought some of that meat you like.
Ah, mead. Yes, you are now most welcome at my fire. Hop up on that log there. Where have I been? Well, at first I was simply raging after that bear, but as my rage waned, I began to get a good look at this world, and since then I have been exploring it.
You mean you actually went to a town for another reason than to just raid it?
Oh, I have done my share of both. A savage does what his nature implores, after all. I do tend to indulge in my passions. No, what I mean is, I have been taking in the beauty of this world, both civil and wild. I am pleased that I have come.
You seem kind of contemplative. Are you feeling alright?
Alright, yes, I am immortal after all. I am savage inevitability. I am calm because I am wise. Also, because I managed to get that bear. Here, you want a piece? I consider myself quite the cook.
Oh no, I don't consume flesh to survive. Remember? Creature magic?
Good. More for me, then. What is that? Oh, you bought a device to record me? Has it been on?
Well, I figured you must have something to say after all this time. I may not be able to record video of this, but I can put your audio onto a video and upload it when I get back to my laptop back at the floppy house.
Ah, I take it my last story did well, then. One day you must show me this YouTube of yours. I long to learn of these privileged few who learn of my wisdom. So, little Faye, you brought me my mead, so I take it you wish to hear a story. A tale of my travels through the worlds before this one? Well, I happen to know just the tale of the Shoddy Axe. I was traveling in thick woodland, air pungent with the smell of wet moss. The path was old but well-traveled. This means that it went somewhere, but also it meant the ever-present threat of bandits. At least, I hope so. As I had eaten the last of my hard bread and dried meats, I was hoping to find berries or perhaps a small game to trap. Worst of all, I was suffering from the most reoccurring of sicknesses, sobriety. Surely, I still had a bit in my wineskin, but that needed to be saved to wash down whatever food I found. I would not wish this horror on anyone. As it turns out, I had little time to worry about it. A man with a drawn bow stepped from behind a mighty oak tree to my right. From behind, I heard another, failing his attempt at stealth with inexperienced footing. I sized the two men up with eye and ear. The bowman was taller than me, and had obviously not missed many meals. The other was drawing nervous, short breaths, the pant of youth and fear and inexperience. This led me to believe the bowman was the leader, which is good. A leader should meet the gaze of his prey. The bowman demanded my pack, my pouch, and my axe, which I had not yet drawn. All that he saw was an older man traveling the woods. He had no idea of how much further I had actually come. From the dimness in his eyes, I doubt he could conceive of it. These two men were not worthy of polishing my axe with their blood. I heard a sword being drawn from behind me, far too close for me to get to the axe at my pack, and frankly, I was not in the mood to die that day. I raised my palms over my head, and the bowman laughed at how easy his prey had surrendered. The obstinate fool. He had no idea that I had a clean tunic on, and I did not wish to bleed on it. He seemed to want to further my misery and led me into the wood, where his younger sword wielder tied me to a gnarled tree. The two laughed and mocked me as they went through my sack and pouch. They tore my pavilion out of spite and drained my wineskin. Clearly, they now needed to die. By the time they had stoked their fire and burned my things in front of me, I had successfully sized up my foes and realized what I needed to do. I mocked them. I berated the footwork of the young swordsman. I dissected the ambush tactic that they used to bring me here. I chastised their shoddy axe at the hip of the bowman, explaining how using such a shoddy axe would only lead to the wielder's own death. I even brought up the likelihood of his questionable parentage to help justify such incompetence. Were they brother and sister? This brought upon a hail of insults from them. At last, I had struck a nerve. The young swordsman drew his weapon and approached my tree with murder in his eyes. The bowman obviously took great offense at my opinion of his shoddy axe and drew it, coming up behind his younger companion. They were both armed and intent on killing me, who was unarmored and tied to an old tree. These poor fools didn't have a chance. The man with the shoddy axe demanded to his companion that they torture this frail, bearded fool, and he swung his weapon at my head. I ducked, barely missing the blow as he recovered and his companion stepped into his place. The sword swung low, causing me to jump and strain against my bonds. I continued to mock them, saying that they had poor aim and I was safer unarmed than armed. This had the effect of spurring them on to continue. The axe swung high, the sword low, causing me to groan and pull against my bonds with all my might to avoid the killing blows. Over and over they swung, and I dodged, and with each hop, the ropes that held me frayed against the gnarled tree, until at last, with one mighty lunge to avoid the sword below me, they snapped. I leapt into the air, grabbing the shoddy axe from the startled man and spun about, removing his greatest weakness, his head. The young man didn't have time to pull his sword from the tree as he fell onto his backside. The head of his companion rolled over to greet him. I love bringing friends together like that. I stood over the young man, growling at his impotence and his poor tactic, but more the sheer insult of having me have to brandish such a shoddy weapon. The young man crawled backwards, but I was not going to let him get out without a proper lesson. I grabbed his boot and I drug him to an edge of a nearby ravine which had an old tree spanning it. Far below, in the darkness, I heard a brook and decided the lesson would be learned here. I stuck the axe into the horizontal tree, handle down, and lifted the young man up to meet my gaze. I yelled at him to calm down and pay attention because his life depended upon it. This fool was going to learn something for once in his life, and I pointed to his shoddy axe, asking him how anyone calling himself a man could carry such a pathetic weapon. Where was his pride? He mumbled something about it being the best weapon he had ever crafted. The poor fool would consider kindling a weapon, and I told him so. Naturally, the young man became livid, certain that I was about to kill him. So I placed a fatherly hand upon his shoulder and choked him a bit. I promised that I would not kill him, something I have granted few others. I explained that I merely wished to teach him something about craftsmanship and how to be a savage. I told him that the first lesson of being a savage is to never purposefully handle a weapon that you are not proud of. I decided that I would restrict my teachings to one lesson this time, as he seemed rather dim. So I hastened the lesson by pushing him into the ravine. He screamed a bit and grabbed onto the handle of the axe, flailing his legs below him and slowly swung. I walked onto the tree and stood over him, demanding that he repeat back to me what I had just taught him. And if he did, I would bring him up and let him run free. I knelt down, true to my word, and extended my hand, waiting. He gathered what courage he could stammer, and the first lesson of being a warrior, he said, is never handle. There was a crack of wood, and the handle of the Shoddy Axe began to split from its head, and the young man seemed to suddenly suspend in the air in disbelief. I calmly waited for him to finish. Teaching the youth of today is important, and one must be patient after all. However, he chose to be rude, and instead of completing my lesson, he fell. For a lot longer than I thought. I yelled down into the darkness, never to handle what? But there was no answer, and never would be. I kicked the metal head of the axe down to him, returning his property, something he hadn't allowed me. I'm such a softy. So I grumbled and returned to their campsite. Kids these days and their impudence. I go through the trouble of trying to teach them strong life lessons, and what do? They fall to their death in ravines. What is wrong with the youth of today? So, what did you think, Pete? Do the youth of today deserve my teachings? Let us hope so. Go and place my wisdom onto your YouTubes. Let my words teach them, so that they may keep themselves out of ravines. Let them learn, and let them stay savage.